Okay, so we've got to talk about what's happening in Venezuela. Because a huge story is breaking right now, and it looks like the relationship between the US and Venezuela might have just hit a point of no return. We're talking about reports of the very first US military strike on Venezuelan soil. This could be a massive flashpoint in what's already, a super tense situation.
And then we get this quote. So we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. That's from President Trump himself. And wow, in a radio interview, he seemed to just confirm a whole new, much more aggressive phase in this pressure campaign. I mean, those words, they just raised this massive question. Did U.S. policy just cross a line it can't uncross?
Yeah, because let's be clear, this isn't just another sanction or some kind of political chess move. If this is confirmed, a strike on a dock facility inside Venezuela, that is a huge military escalation. It could literally be the turning point in a conflict that's been bubbling just under the surface for years.
So this is the big question, right? The one we're really going to dig into. Has the U.S. actually carried out its first attack on Venezuelan soil? But to really get a handle on just how serious this is, we've got to look back. We need to understand how we even got to this point. What was the buildup that led to a drone reportedly hitting a target inside Venezuela?
Okay, so the escalating pressure campaign. How did we get here? The thing is, this reported land strike, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. Nope. It's really the latest chess move in this campaign that's been getting more and more intense. A campaign the Trump administration has been running in the seas around Venezuela for months now.
And this timeline? Man, it just lays out how fast things have ramped up. Look at this. Back in September, it starts with maritime strikes on boats that the U.S. said were carrying drugs. Then, boom, October hits, and the president gives the CIA the green light for covert ops inside Venezuela. That really opened the door for all kinds of secret missions. Then, just in the last few weeks, U.S. forces started seizing sanctioned Venezuelan oil tankers. And all of that brings us right here, to this moment, the first reported strike on land.
And get this, the scale of this whole operation, even before this land strike, is just staggering. I mean, look at the numbers. We're talking about 30 different strikes on boats since September, over 107 people killed. And this is all backed by huge military presence. We're talking something like 15,000 personnel and some serious naval hardware, like an entire aircraft carrier sent to the region. This is not a small operation.
All right, so justification meets skepticism. This is where it gets really interesting. What's the official reason for such a massive military operation? Well, the story the U.S. is telling is running up against some pretty serious questions from experts and international groups.
So you've got two very different stories here. On one side, the U.S. government is saying it's in a full-on armed conflict with, and this is their term, narco-terrorists. And that phrase, armed conflict, is super important from a legal standpoint. Why? Because calling it that, instead of, say, a law enforcement operation, is how they justify using deadly military force. The whole stated goal is to stop drugs from getting into the U.S. But then you have the other side, right? And critics are asking some pretty tough questions, like, is Venezuela even the real source of the drug problem? And are these deadly strikes even legal?
And to really drive their point home, listen to this quote from the defense secretary. He called them the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere. I mean, that is some seriously intense language. He's directly comparing these groups to Al-Qaeda, saying the U.S. is hunting them down with the same level of sophistication and precision. It's a really powerful comparison, and it's clearly meant to justify a very powerful military response.
Okay, but here comes the reality check, because a lot of the official data just doesn't seem to line up. The UN's own drug office, they say Venezuela isn't even a major cocaine producer. A recent DEA report on cocaine trafficking, it doesn't even mention Venezuela. And what about fentanyl, which is a huge concern in the US? Well, experts will tell you it's not made in or trafficked from Venezuela. And maybe the most critical point, the US still hasn't shown any public proof that the 100+ people killed in these boat strikes were actually on drug boats. So you can see why the Maduro government is pointing a finger and saying this is all just a smokescreen for the U.S. to get its hands on their oil.
This is where things get legally very, very serious. Because of this lack of evidence, you're starting to hear this term extrajudicial killing. And what that means is basically a killing by a government without any kind of trial or legal process. Some experts in the laws of war, these are the folks who literally wrote the book on the Geneva Conventions, have gone even further. They're telling reporters that these boat strikes look an awful lot like murders and war crimes.
So, a prelude to war? What comes next? I mean, with the stakes this high, and with the action now seemingly moving from the sea to the land, you just can't avoid the question, what happens now? Is this really just a counter-drug operation, or are we watching the first act of something much, much bigger?
And this isn't just an international debate,
The heat is getting turned up right in Washington. We're seeing real concern from both sides of the aisle in Congress. Democrats and Republicans are demanding that the administration explain the legal basis for this whole campaign. And so far, it seems like they're just brushing those questions aside.
And this right here, this quote from Senator Rand Paul, a Republican, really captures how serious this fear is getting. He's calling these actions provocations and a prelude to war. I mean, think about that. When a prominent senator from the president's own party is sounding an alarm that loud, you know the situation is getting critical. So that's where we are. The U.S. campaign has jumped from sea to land. The language is getting more and more intense. The number of people keeps going up. And you have lawmakers in Washington openly talking about the risk of a much larger war. So now that strikes on land are apparently on the table, the real question isn't just where does this conflict go from here, it's how far is it prepared to go?